Okay, it's one of these questions which you think it's easy to answer, but it's not actually. So I grew up in central western Poland, which is far from sea. And if I saw sea or if I went to the seashore, it was the Baltic coast. And the Baltic is an incredible sea, but it's a very different sea than what you can imagine when you think about marine biology. There's no jumping dolphins, there's no blue clear water, and there's no coral reefs around. I was also brought up by the family full of engineers and teachers, and I didn't have a single biologist in my family. So there's no really answer why did I choose. I would say I was probably more interested in biology in general, like animals and plants. And the interest came simply from films and books I read. So I was brought up by reading a lot of book by Polish explorers like Arkady Fiedler or Włodzimierz Puchalski, which showed amazing pictures of animals and plants. But I guess also, like many of us, I was watching David Attenborough a lot, which in Poland was read by Krystyna Czubówna. So in my head, it's her voice behind all of these amazing BBC films, and they attract people. I mean, they are full of colors and motions and the world which we can't always see just behind our door. So I wasn't particularly interested in marine biology. I was just interested in biology. And then through my um I wouldn't say academic career, but through my path to become a scientist, I just met people who showed me marine biology as part of the biology, and this what hooked me, and that's how I became a marine biologist. It's also a question which I couldn't really answer very easily, especially because the question is related to teenage years. And I think a lot what we do in teenage years is by luck and chance and by who we meet, or at least I myself can't really. If I think about myself at my teenage time, I definitely wasn't a grown-up person who knew what I wanted and who had a very defined path. So my answer would be a lot happened by chance and by luck. And apart from what I mentioned in my previous uh, question, I have to say I was brought up by very standard family in 80s and 90s, where we as kids and teenagers, we were given a lot of freedom. We weren't really supervised by our parents, which means that you could go through any open door. And I understand that this is very different upbringing that nowadays, where kids get more protection and more guidance, where we were said, okay, this is the world, explore it. And I was probably the lucky person because I had a lot of curiosity, courage, maybe stupidity, mainly, and responsibility, depends how you name it. When I wasn't afraid to go through many doors, and okay, some of them led to meeting interesting people in the right place and right time, and some of them might have been dead ends. So there's not one particular crucial thing which I would think is very important. Is who you meet and who inspires you and how much, I don't know, courage or interest you have to proceed with your stuff. What was definitely crucial is the teachers I had at school. And I was quite lucky because the teachers who taught me biology were the one who inspired me to even explore stuff just behind the corner in my backyard. Um, Maybe if the same teachers, amazing teachers, were the one who were teaching me history, I would become historian. I don't know. There's no simple answer. Probably the biggest challenge, if I think about it right now, is the fact that I come from an Eastern European country where we are brought up in quite a defined hierarchy, especially in the academic or um, science world, where it's very clear where you are in your hierarchy, and it's also very clear how this hierarchy defines your communication, defines your I don't want to say ability, but defines what you have to do and what you can do. And then, although I did most of my university and most of my career abroad, it's still somehow deep in my head that there's a hierarchy and I have to know my place. On top of that, being a woman, and especially now when I'm more interested about this kind of gender gap in academia or in science in general, I realized that this kind of low esteem and imposter syndrome is something which is very difficult to overcome, and it will probably take years for the whole system to change, even if a lot of changes has already happened, for women or people with maybe lower self-esteem to actually be able to achieve what they do. So this is probably quite a big challenge for not just myself, but many, many people. The other challenge which I found, or recently name it, I would say, is that for a very long time in my academic career, I was convinced that to become a marine biologist, the only path is this classical path through academia. So you obtain your PhD, and then you go higher and higher in the ladder. But in the last 5 or maybe even 10 years, I've been involved in many other projects and many other ways of becoming a marine biologist. And I think people should be more and more aware, or hopefully there is a tendency of people to be aware that there's many more paths to become marine biologist than this classical academic. And even within academia, there are many options of becoming a technician, becoming a research assistant, and then outside academia, the whole thing about consultancy, about NGOs, about different organizations which can also work in marine mammal field, marine biology field. So I would say it's quite challenging for any person to understand what kind of path he or she can take in order to become marine biologist. But there's definitely not one and only and one and the most important one, or one and the most accurate one. I don't think the skills for marine mammal scientists are much different than for any other scientist. I think the biggest challenge and what is related then the set of skills which are needed to overcome this challenge is that nowadays we live in an extremely dynamic world, and it's not only the changes which happen with the environment, but it also the availability of the tools we have and all of this like incredibly fast change in technology. And I don't consider myself old, but I probably am already too slow to catch up with all of these changes. And I'm talking about all kind of changes, technological, the stuff related to, I know, your coding ability, etc. So I think what is very important for any of us is we have to be flexible, which means that this idea of maybe sticking to one methodology and one technique which we mastered N years ago is maybe not the right thing right now, because in today it could be the right technique, but in a week or two it may already be outdated. It doesn't mean that we have to be able to catch up with everything. This is just simply impossible. That's why I think what is very important is that we really have to work together. This kind of lonely wolf idea of academia, which may have worked 20, 30 years ago, I don't think it's valid anymore. And it's simply because this kind of collective knowledge exchange and collective knowledge about different tools and technique, this is what brings different projects or different ideas forwards. So yes, work together and be flexible. I would say these are the two most important things. I don't think the answer to this question is much different than the answer to my previous questions. I think the future is somehow related to the presence, which is this extreme rapid changes. And now we have to bring up as well the rapid changes which actually do happen with our environment. And I think this is the biggest challenge we as scientists face, is how to overcome it. And I'm not only talking from the technological perspective, I'm not only talking from the knowledge perspective, but I'm also talking about political, historical perspective. So how we as humanity can overcome climate change. And I think this is where we scientists, marine biologists, marine mammalogists, any kind of scientists, are one of the crucial elements. And I think this challenge, this future challenge, is going to be our challenge for the next decades, if not centuries. The other future challenge is still related to what I said in the previous question. It's like the world is so extremely dynamic in terms of technology and in terms of access to knowledge and possibilities of sharing this knowledge. Then we have to be really flexible to make sure we get most out of it, but also that we don't close doors for people who may be a little bit behind, or people who are not able to catch up with everything. And also accepting that we cannot catch up with everything ourselves, but maybe collectively as a team. So I think these are the quite a big challenges for the future, to make sure that we scientists can overcome the problems which we are facing as humanity, but also the fact that how to make sure that we are still valuable as human beings in face of, or in times when technology is taking over.